Hi, it's Dwyer. It is April 2nd, 2024. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. Also, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, let me just say, it's very important to see the big picture. I understand we're all into sports. I understand many of us are gamblers. I plead guilty to both, right? But it's very important to recognize opportunities in the world. Let me just take a quick minute here to say this morning Bitcoin has cratered. It's below $66,000 a coin, right? This is a huge buying opportunity, folks. Understand, historically, when halvings are upon us, there's usually what's called consolidation before and after the halving. In other words, prices will fluctuate, prices will then stabilize before the next leg up, right? This is a major buying opportunity. Remember today, April 2nd, 2024, remember that today Bitcoin was below $66,000 a coin. As you look back, if you later find that this was a major buying opportunity, you want to target dips like this when you're dealing with assets like Bitcoin. Let me also say too that the precious metals investment group, for them, life lately has been just walking into an unguarded room, seeing money on the table, and walking over and putting some of it in their pockets. That's going to continue. I know gold is at an all-time high in terms of the US dollar. We figured that out already, right? I'm just here to tell you that this leg up is long overdue. Gold has, in my opinion, a lot more to run. Here again, look at the gold price. It's a little bit over $2,200 an ounce. Look at the date. Let's say 6 months from now, look back. If you see where people have made huge profits, then you need to target opportunities like this in the future. The best play, in my opinion, in the precious metals space is silver right now. Just look at the all-time high on silver. Folks, silver's not even close to its all-time high right now. And I'm just telling you the market conditions are set up for a silver run. Let's talk boxing. You know what? You're all dressed up at 154 pounds and you've just picked up a couple of titles. Your name is Sebastian Fundora. You've just beaten Tim Tszyu. I understand the skeptics are out there. I understand one judge had Tszyu far ahead. I understand Tszyu was thrown off his game by that cut on the top of his head, which was kind of a freak accident. We get all of that. But understand now, of all the people in the sport of boxing, you, Sebastian Fundora, have a huge opportunity in front of you. You have choices in front of you. Given the amount of blood that bled from Tim Tszyu's head, he himself might not want to exercise the immediate rematch clause. It's my understanding the contract gives him an opportunity to wait one fight before doing so. So now you have Errol Spence hopping in the ring. Understand Errol Spence is a PBC poster boy. Understand PBC has a deal with Amazon where you can now see big PBC pay-per-view fights on Amazon, right? You have to pay-per-view it, but at the same time you know where to look. You understand the muscle behind a possible ad campaign and exposure. And here is PBC's poster boy in the ring telling you, after you've just beaten Tim Tszyu, who, let's be clear here, was one of boxing's better champions, is still one of boxing's more talented guys, right? Understand, you've just beaten Tim Tszyu, and here is here is Errol Spence telling you you have to fight the big dog now. Right? Now, let's be clear here. If you're Sebastian Fundora, you might have been confused. You might have thought to yourself, well, wow, why is Spence telling me to fight Crawford? Then you realize Spence thinks he's the big dog. You also understand that a sanctioning body has said, hey, player, if you don't fight Terence Crawford next, we're going to strip you. Because we want the best as our representative in the division. So Fundora could fight Spence, big money, big exposure, right? The venue could be in Spence's Texas. Understand, Texas has a very permissive, and I mean very permissive, state boxing commission. Understand, Errol Spence, behind the scenes, is friends with Jerry Jones, one of the biggest sports entrepreneurs in any field. Jerry happens to have a huge venue where people like Manny Pacquiao have fought, right? And Jerry's the kind of guy who, when he's involved in a boxing promotion, he will get people like Darren Woodson. He will get some legendary Dallas Cowboys to participate in the promotion. Jerry is that kind of guy, right? Jerry's the guy who makes a huge event even bigger. But understand, at least from this seat, the best in the sport pound for pound is Terence Crawford. If you, Sebastian Fundora, fight and beat Crawford, and understand, even I would consider you the betting side of the play. Right? Crawford is an angles guy. Crawford beats you stylistically. Sebastian Fundora is much taller than Crawford. Open question. Has Crawford ever encountered angles like this? Right? Those moves Crawford makes where he hits you, expects your head to be a certain place, and then finishes you off. My goodness, could he do that against a guy who's 6'5"? You remember that uppercut Crawford threw on Yorkie's Gamboa, almost took Gamboa's head right off his shoulders. Right? If he throws that uppercut on Sebastian Fundora, wow, is Sebastian Fundora's head going to be where Yorkie's Gamboa's head was, or is it going to be someplace else, out the picture? You, Sebastian Fundora, understand, if you beat Terence Crawford, many people are going to look at the resume and they're going to think to themselves, wow, why isn't this guy considered the best in the sport pound for pound? Let's be real here too. The Canelo Benavidez train has already left the station. Folks, I can tell you here, that fight is never happening. Benavidez was weight drained at 168. Now he's eaten dessert, and he's up at 175. Right? He's never going to lose the weight to get back to 168. I don't care what promotional statements members of his entourage have to say to the press. Understand, too, this might be a Gilberto Ramirez situation, where Ramirez jumps from 168 to 175. Now suddenly Ramirez is up at 200. Now suddenly Ramirez is telling you, he's acknowledging that he walks around at 210. Right? So for weight reasons, Canelo's never fighting Benavidez. More importantly, for legacy reasons, Canelo understands that there are huge fights out there. We'll get back to Canelo in a moment here. Let's pivot back to Sebastian Fundora. So you're Fundora. Errol Spence is in the ring and he's saying, hey, it's time to fight the big dog now. You understand, behind door number 2 is Terence Crawford, the best in the sport pound for pound for many. Which way do you turn? Understand, if you don't fight Crawford, you lose a belt. I believe the choice is clear here. right? Everyone has an opinion. I don't expect anyone to follow my opinion, of course, right? I'm really talking to other boxing fans here. And just talking about what folks might be thinking. If I am Fundora's advisor, and understand, Samson Lukowitz is one of the biggest names in boxing. He used to advise people like Sergio Martinez in the past. Let's just say Fundora has very seasoned people around him. If I'm advising Sebastian Fundora, I tell him, this is an easy decision. You need to fight Errol Spence. Right? Let's just talk about the reasons why. First, as I mentioned earlier, Spence is with PBC. He's one of PBC's flagship fighters. Right? This Tim Tszyu fight that Fundora just had was presented by PBC and Amazon. Right? Promotionally, Spence lines up. Understand, too, Spence is coming off a loss. Spence is coming off inactivity. Same inactivity as Crawford, but understand, Crawford's inactivity started with a win, not a loss. Spence is having eye problems. Right, folks? Follow the surgeries. Follow the interviews. Right? We pretend we know what these fighters are seeing in the ring. Then we later find out Harry Greb, great fighter, blind in one eye when he died. We know that off the autopsy. Joe Frazier later in his life admitted he was blind in one eye. You realize he was supposed to fight Ali in L.A., but they realized they would never get the regulatory approval. They had a connect in New York, who, of course, during the eye exam was a bit, we'll use the word permissive, allowed Frazier to pass that eye exam. Understand, this is boxing. Look at what happened to Olympic gold medalist Sugar Ray Seales. Look up his name. Right? Errol Spence is having eye problems, in my opinion. Right? Now might be the time to fight him. This not only is a young man's game, folks, it's the jungle. It's survival of the fittest. Let's go one step further. Errol Spence is having trainer issues. Make no mistake, I personally consider Derek James to be one of the very best trainers in the sport. Right? I can tell you one time I was in a sports book and I was just hanging out having drinks. I looked up, I saw a fighter I did not know walking in the ring with a well-known trainer. Knowing nothing about the fighter, I said, man, I've got to throw a few dollars on this guy. Because if he has this trainer next to him, I know they have a plan. Right? Easy money. Well, let me just say, Derek James is one of the best trainers in the sport. Now's not the time to switch trainers. Let me also say, too, that we assume this fighter-trainer relationship is really a one-night-only thing. That's not the case. There's an entire training camp that happens. Right? Tough feelings sometimes can impact the quality of the training camp. Let me also say, too, another reason to fight Spence, and let's be blunt here, we have opinions. This is an opinion site. Spence is not as dangerous as Terence Crawford. Right? You could track Crawford. You could look at his fights. The bottom line is, if you're Crawford's next opponent, you have no idea what Crawford's going to do in the ring against you. Because Crawford is a different guy every fight. Not Errol Spence. Right? Spence has a great back foot, which surprised me. That's the Mikey Garcia fight. Spence does have a bunch of skills. Folks, throw the back foot out against Fundora. Fundora has too much reach. If you're backing away from Fundora, he'll hunt you down. Right? Let's just say I'd rather fight the guy who lost to Terence Crawford than Terence Crawford if I'm getting the same amount of money. Right? So, for me, Fundora's choice is easy. I do a Riddick Bowe, a little bit more diplomatically than Bowe, right? Bowe, of course, famously threw belts in the garbage at a press conference, right? He was having a feud with the sanctioning bodies. Here, you can just say to a sanctioning body, hey, you're telling me that if I don't fight the best in the sport pound for pound, you're going to strip me? Here's your belt back. I thank you very much for allowing me to wear it for a few days. I'm going for the big money. I'm going for the fight that I think I can win. The fight that's going to keep me in the conversation, especially since the water is now deep at 154 with the addition of Crawford and Spence. Let's not forget Jamel Charlo. Right? So, let me just say, if I'm Fundora, I pick Errol Spence as my next opponent. Now that opens the door for one of the best fights in boxing. Right? Folks, understand the sanctioning body that wanted Fundora to fight Terence Crawford now could have Tim Tszyu against Terence Crawford fall in its lap. Folks, that's a great fight. Understand, many of you are unconvinced, even with the blood pouring down Tim Tszyu's face, that Tim Tszyu lost to Fundora, right? Didn't one judge have Tim Tszyu winning by a few rounds? Here you have two of the sport's best who possibly could fight each other. Let's add another guy into the mix who could upset the apple cart. If Canelo beats unbeaten Jaime Munguia, if Canelo decides, okay, let me have a farewell fight. Now I know the great Bernard Hopkins, one of the best in the middleweight division's history. And understand, that's just one of the titles Hopkins had, right? Hopkins beats Antonio Tarver, then goes on a run at light heavyweight, right? But Bernard Hopkins believes that Canelo is going to have a farewell fight against David Benavidez, right? This isn't Bernard Hopkins's webpage. This is my webpage. I don't believe that fight ever happens. What I believe might happen is Canelo might call out Terence Crawford. Talk about boxing fans getting spoiled. Folks, that's a great fight. Understand, too, from Crawford's perspective, and look, I'm not saying I have any authority to talk on anyone's behalf or have any inside information whatsoever. We're just speculating. We're approaching this like we approach stock investments. Right from the Crawford perspective, you understand that Canelo is a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's an easy vote. Could you imagine being a voter for the Hall of Fame and they say Saul Alvarez, then they start listing his accomplishments? For many, before you even get to the Canelo at 168-pound chapter, people are going to hear that you beat Miguel Cotto. You beat Danny Jacobs. Many folks are going to say, wow, that's impressive. Right? One judge thought you didn't lose the Floyd Mayweather fight. Right? Those are the kind of names where people are going to say, wow, this guy sounds like a Hall of Famer already. That's before they get to the run through 168 that includes, and let's be clear on it, victories over an unbeaten Callum Smith, an unbeaten Billy Joe Saunders, an unbeaten Caleb Plant. Right? Just understand, folks, the Canelo story is compelling. If I'm Terence Crawford, and I'm older than Canelo, right? People seem to have slept on Crawford's age. And I'm thinking, wow, I want to fight the toughest. I want to fight the guy who's the most historical. I don't have that many fights left. I want to save them for the very best. And of course, I don't want to deal with the angles that would come with fighting a 6'5" Sebastian Fundora. If I'm Terence Crawford, I'd be very interested in a fight against Canelo. Understand, Canelo would be thinking, wow, I get to fight a guy my own size. People aren't expecting me to hop in the ring with Benavidez, who will be fighting at 175. Right? If I'm Canelo, I'm targeting Crawford. If I'm Crawford, I'm targeting Canelo. I understand. Crawford wants the belt at 154 because he's a belt collector. Right? But I believe if you approached Crawford, and let's face it, Canelo now different promotional group. He's rolling with Eddie Hearn. Let's face it, Eddie Hearn has an in with Saudi Arabia where they're handing out the biggest money possible. Right? Just understand the lay of the land here, folks. Terence Crawford, if he's bypassed by Sebastian Fundora, and let's face it, not only is Crawford a belt collector, Crawford is a undisputed title division collector. Right? So Crawford, I'm sure, is going to revisit Sebastian Fundora. But if Fundora doesn't fight Crawford, understand Crawford's looking at two of the most skilled names in the sport, Tim Tszyu and Canelo. So, the most spoiled group in the room are you and me, the boxing fans. Folks, 154 is about to give us some treats. Let's be prepared. To sum up, I believe that Fundora is going to pivot toward Errol Spence if he has the power to do so. If Tim Tszyu exercises an immediate rematch clause, that could throw things up against the wall, right? But just understand, if I'm Fundora, I'm thinking payday, Errol Spence at the right time, right? Eye problems, trainer problems, rust, coming off a loss. If I'm Fundora, the choice really makes itself, right? Understand, fighting Spence now doesn't mean that I can't fight Crawford, Canelo later, right? But I need for people to think about some other names. Boachuk at 154. Folks, he's legit. Don't lose sight of him. And let's mention the name that nobody dares mention. Janabek at 160. Right? I believe, well, let's just say there's some great talents out there who don't have the spotlight on them for the moment. Right? You as a gambler need to know who those guys are. So if anyone makes a mistake, and if you ever hear that, let's say a Fundora is going to fight Janabek, or a Spence is going to fight Janabek, even a Crawford against Janabek, you need to know beforehand that Janabek is the betting side of the play for those matchups. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Understand too, I get that my views are just one set of views. Please, don't take any of my views as gospel. I'm just the guy sitting next to you in the bleachers. Right? You think for yourself. But the way I see it is when Errol Spence hops in the ring and thinks he's the big dog, he's the big dog at 154 pounds, you need to think to yourself, if you're Fundora, wow, this is an opportunity. Right? Understand, the state of Texas, again, a very permissive, laissez-faire boxing commission in my eyes. Right? I don't think anyone in the state of Texas is going to look too closely at Errol Spence's eyes. I believe, like the rest of us, boxers have egos. Right? Errol Spence, his problems with his trainer, I'm not sure if Spence understands the value added that his trainer brings to the table. Right? Boxers think they're doing it by themselves. Right? They don't realize that sometimes that trainer is the one who has them throwing the punch that's actually landing in the fight. Right? So, as I like to point out too, Manny Pacquiao had a trainer, Freddie Roach. Right? The two guys, of course, this is boxing, personalities, egos. The two guys, of course, had a little bit of a disagreement after the Jeff Horde fight, and Freddie Roach disappeared for a fight from Manny Pacquiao's corner. Now, smart guys figure out that their success is really a team effort. Right? Needless to say, Manny Pacquiao shortly thereafter did the right thing and had Freddie Roach back in his corner. As I like to point out, Angelo Dundee back in the day trained both Jimmy Ellis and Muhammad Ali. So, of course, Ellis and Ali have a fight, and Dundee ends up in Ellis's corner. Understand, Ali was the guy who was the Olympic gold medalist. Ali was the guy who was the heavyweight champion. Right? Dundee was in Ellis's corner against Ali. Right? Very next fight, Ali had Dundee in his corner again. Right? All I'm saying is, if you're Fundora and you see a problem between one of boxing's best trainers, Derek James, and Errol Spence, the time to fight Spence is when James is not in his corner. Right? You want to be the guy who catches Spence when he doesn't have the full infrastructure around him. I believe now is that time. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.